IB Nation, welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. A little IB After Dark tonight with my guy, Trevor Trowbridge. You know, Trevor, you weren't in the post-game show on Saturday, and we had people like, where's Trevor? Where's Trevor? And I felt a little unloved. I'm not going to lie to you. I felt a little unloved and underappreciated. So I was like, well, I got him getting back for a show. And I couldn't wait till tomorrow, Trevor. We had to get you back tonight because we have got to talk some Notre Dame recruiting. So that's why we're having this little special edition of Irish Breakdown podcast, because Notre Dame didn't get one. They got two commitments today, Trevor. I put an intel piece out this morning. This is why you need to be on the message board. And I said, look, Cameron Herron, we'll see. We'll make some decisions soon, very, very soon. I said, don't be surprised if the quarterback move is made, in the very near future. I didn't know that it was going to happen today, but I did feel it was going to happen in the next couple of days. But Notre Dame went out and got two flips today, Trevor, and we're going to break them both down. Early this morning, Indiana in-state offensive lineman right down the street from you. No, well, I shouldn't say right down the street, but at least in your city, right? Warren Central high school player Cameron Herron flipped his commitment from he was committed to the Iowa Hawkeyes to Notre Dame. And then tonight, Blake Hebert, and it's not Hebert, it's Hebert. I learned that when Notre Dame initially started recruiting him. It is not the Cajun version. It is the, Northeastern version. So it's Blake Hebert, who they're both 25 players. He had been committed to Clemson he committed to Clemson before Deuce Knight committed to Notre Dame. And Notre Dame was able to flip his commitment as well, Trevor, and we are going to talk about both of them, man. But it's nice to finally have some really good, positive recruiting momentum for Notre Dame after what had been sort of a slow, quiet last couple of months. And really the only news we've seen has been not good news, obviously, but it's nice to see some good news and some exciting movement on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, it's great to be back on the show. I was just thinking before it, man. I was like, man, I missed being on the post-game show. It was a good weekend, but definitely missed being around. So, but in terms of recruiting, it's a fantastic answer and a pretty quick answer by Chad Bowden and Marcus Freeman after kind of that lull of, what happened with Deuce Knight and everything that went on there. So it was a great response. Excited to dive into it today with you, man.
Well, let's kick things off, Trevor, talking about Blake Hebert. This is obviously the most intriguing. It's one of two very intriguing positions for Notre Dame, the most intriguing. And let's get into a little bit of backstory. So, Trevor, we always talk about how these commitments come to be. And Blake Hebert is a name that I'll be honest, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I knew who the quarterback commit was going to be. And I just kept it from y'all because I'm in the know. Notre Dame really wanted to keep this quiet. And a big reason why is because they had a guy in mind. They wanted to make sure that they could get him, because if it got out, they told me and I didn't honor their wishes, or they told someone else and that person didn't honor their wishes of don't tell anybody, and it got out, and then you don't get this kid and he decides to stick with his commitment to Clemson. Now all of a sudden, whoever you want to go get next knows that he was the next in line, right? So you didn't even want me the most. You wanted that guy the most, and then you didn't get him, so you're turning to me. So it's actually a pretty smart strategy as to why Notre Dame kind of kept this thing under wraps. But, once Deuce Knight decommitted from Notre Dame, they needed to find a quarterback. And my understanding is there was a few kids on the board, but Blake Hebert is one that they kind of reached out to because he was a guy that this staff liked a lot early on, Trevor. He got a very early winter-spring offer back in 2023. At the time, he was at Central Catholic in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and he was a teammate of Preston Zinner at that time. Notre Dame liked him a lot. He eventually picked Clemson. So then he missed he got injured in his first game of his junior year, I believe, correct? I think he hurt his ankle, I believe is what it was. Transfers to Brunswick School in Greenwich, Connecticut. Now, if that sounds familiar to you as Notre Dame fans, it should, because that is the home of Ethan Long and Maddie Augustine, two Notre Dame commits in the 25 class. So once there was some expressed interest in both parties, he really became the top target. And I was told that Notre Dame was out to see him recently and kind of evaluate him and kind of see where he was. And then they tried to make a move. And for the last week, my sources have said, hey, look, we've got our guy. We just need to see if he's going to do this or not. And so if he's not, then, we're going to have to figure out where we wanted to go. But this wasn't a 3 kids on the board. Who wants to commit first? We'll take whoever because we need a quarterback. They said, this is the guy we want. and they went after him, Trevor. And look, yes, it always stinks to lose Deuce Knight, talented player, been committed for a while, but the key was going to be, okay, the process doesn't matter as much as the end result. And at the end of the day, if you just can kind of ignore the process for a second, Notre Dame got themselves a very talented quarterback in the 2025 class, and they kind of dinged a rival a little bit in order to get him. Another top 10 program that they were able to get him. So big pickup for Notre Dame. And I'll dive in a little bit more of the back story, but I think it was imperative that once Deuce left the class, that Notre Dame really, they didn't need it from a football standpoint, because in that regard, it's just like, look, you got Noah Grubbs committed in 26. You got CJ Carr in 24. Just get a solid player, a Steve Angeli type even, and the depth chart will be okay. But if you want to make a recruiting splash, this is the kind of player they need, especially as they're trying to finish on a couple really talented pass catchers in the class. Getting a big-armed kid like this, Trevor, was very important.
You touched on it, and it's really exciting because it's just, again, it's turning around the narrative that Notre Dame can't compete with the top upper brass of college football when it comes to recruiting. So really glad that you touched on we're flipping this kid from Clemson, which is exciting. But the impact for the rest of the class is massive. Notre Dame is still hunting to get additional wide receivers added to the class. And I know we're going to jump into film and we're going to continue to talk about Blake and what he brings to the table, but cannot emphasize it enough. This is a strong-armed kid. And the highlight film that you're going to watch is from his sophomore year because, Brian, to your point, he fractured his ankle in the start of 2023, I believe. So it is exciting. It's really promising to see what Notre Dame has in the pipeline and what they're able to do to start filling up this quarterback room just full of talent. So excited for him to get into South Bend, man.
So as we talked about, Trevor, this is not a new kid for Notre Dame from the standpoint of, okay, Deuce is gone. Now you got to scour the country for quarterbacks. There was some of that process there because if you didn't get this kid, you needed to have a plan in place. The staff really had to I'll tell you why I'm laughing here in a minute, Trevor. The staff really had to have a plan, and they had to work quickly, but also smartly. You don't rush to get a guy. And they showed a little bit of patience with this young man and allowed him to make his decision. But from what I'm told, I was told this 2 weeks ago, that they really felt like they had their guy. They went out and saw him during the bye week. And I was told 2 coaches went out there. They kept it under the radar because they obviously didn't want it to get out. Like, oh, by the way, we saw so-and-so at this game. Why is Gino Gaduli at the Brunswick Academy game? Is he there to watch Matty Ogden? Maybe he's there to offer the quarterback who he offered 2 years ago. You know what I mean? So that would have been a little bit of a dead giveaway. But they were a little bit under the radar. But this is a kid they knew well. So they didn't have to evaluate his the football talent. They had to basically find out, okay, is he, how was the injury? Is he okay? Where's he at? Commitment, all those type of things. But this is a kid that they clearly liked early on, Trevor. And as I said, they were a little bit picky early on throwing out offers. You had Bryce Underwood. You had, I believe, Deuce Knight had an offer. You had George. I'm trying to remember the kids now. George McIntyre had an offer. You had not a lot of kids had offers, but you had a couple. And this was a kid that they offered along with that group early on. And they knew they had to because there was a lot of big-time schools getting on him. Penn State was starting to heat up on him. Clemson had already been on him big time. And so they got on him pretty early and liked him pretty early, had him on campus for a visit. And I was told at the time, if, look, we don't think we're going to get him, but if he wanted to come, we would take him because they knew they were kind of working behind the 8 ball a little bit. He really liked Clemson early on, and there was I think it was Penn State was the other school that he really liked, and they knew they had some ground to make up. But they said, look, we really like this kid. And then, of course, there was the reevaluation. The only thing that really involved in the reevaluation process, Trevor, was just getting Mike Denbrock's seal of approval. Because when they initially offered him, that was with Jared Parker as the OC. And so it was more about fitting that system. Now you just needed Mike Denbrock to check it off and say, hey, look, let's go get him. Obviously he did because they went after him and got after him early. So that's a little bit of that backstory. So it is interesting that this isn't some new kid that they discovered like we've seen him in past years, right? I mean, where you went out and kind of discovered KK Smith because you were getting on the road on senior film. You had the Brandon Hillman kid that they got the summer before last, where it's like they kind of were on him, and he had offers from like William and Mary and, a couple schools like that, and then they get on him, and then his offer list kind of blows up. This is a kid that you've known about since his sophomore season. And so it was just about let's get everything caught up. And that he was committed somewhere else. You had your commitment, and you have to get that process going again. So that's a little bit of the backstory, Trevor. And when you look at how it impacts the class, you need a quarterback. And I know people say, like, look, you've got Kenny Minchie and you've got CJ Carr, you got Steve Angeli. So, you'll have Anthony Rizak. So next year, your depth chart's going to be fine in 2025. And then you've got Noah Grubbs coming in 2026. All sounds great. But the modern reality of college football is that the odds of all four of those kids being on a roster together for the entirety of their careers is pretty slim. I hope that they all stay and finish their careers and get their degrees from Notre Dame and then maybe play fifth-year season somewhere else. But I also have to be realistic that may not happen. So getting a quarterback in this class was very, very important. And yes, they love Kenny Minchie. I mean, I had a great conversation with somebody, in the program the other day about how well Kenny Minchie's coming along. They love CJ Carr. The staff is super high on Noah Grubbs. They basically picked him over Brady. Well, not over Brady Hart like they liked him more, as I said at the time. They loved them both, and first one that wanted to commit, they were going to take. So, I mean, they were on the same level. They love Noah Grubbs. But you needed another quarterback in this class. The better he is, the better it is, because as we've seen, what if somebody gets hurt? What if you view CJ Carr as the future, but CJ goes down? What if you view Noah Grubbs as the future, but he's not as ready to play as early as maybe you'd like him to be, or there's an injury there, as we've seen with guys like Phil Dracovic, as we've seen with guys like Tyler Buckner, as we've seen with guys. I mean, there's been a lot of guys that have had these injuries problems that have kept them out, or they don't develop the way you hope that they would develop. And so they shot for the moon. And I really respect that, because I'd have been fine with just an Angeli type of player. And keep in mind, that's not an insult for me. I think Steve Angeli's a good football player. I was watching the Rutgers game with a buddy of mine on Saturday, and I'm thinking, if Rutgers had Steve Angeli with that running game, dude, they'd be pretty dangerous. And you know what I mean? Like, they'd be a really good football team, because their quarterback is awful. And you look at a kid like Steve Angeli, I'm like, could Steve Angeli go to Syracuse and have similar success to what Kyle McCord is having when he's over? Yeah, I think he could. I mean, he's a good quarterback. He's just not, in my opinion, a championship caliber quarterback. There's a difference. Some people think if you only can play in Notre Dame, you think he sucks. No, I think he's a good Purdue, Indiana, Rutgers, Syracuse type of quarterback. He could thrive there. I'd be okay with that, because a guy like that can win you a lot of ball games when you've got Notre Dame talent around him, right? I'd have been okay with that. But they shot for the moon, and they went after a guy that they valued as a truly difference maker type of quarterback, and they got him. And I think it would have been easier to just find a kid to just fill a roster spot, but they didn't do that. They kept battling and ended themselves with a really good quarterback. So now you have a quarterback in the class, Trevor, and lo and behold, Notre Dame's trying to close on a couple really talented receivers right now, and a running back that I know they like a lot. And you've got some guys that other schools are trying to flip. Getting a quarterback like this sort of helps settle things down a little bit as they move forward with this class.
You already hit on it. And taking a quarterback is important in every single class. It's really easy to look at Notre Dame's depth chart and who they have on their roster right now and say, well, losing Deuce Knight was tough, but for all the reasons that you mentioned, between transfers and injuries and people not panning out the way that you might think, you want to have a plan B through, F when it comes to something like a quarterback position. So I hear you. The thing that's running through my mind that I can't stop thinking about is you kind of start thinking about how much of this is like a Mike Denbrock sort of effect. You know what I mean? Like if I'm a high school kid and I'm looking at the previous offenses that Mike Denbrock has had, and I look at Notre Dame's offense coming alive and who they're starting to get on the recruiting trail and the type of offense, you kind of start to build that vision in your head. I'm not saying that it was all completely Mike Denbrock. I know that Gino Guidugli had a really good relationship with Blake, and I just, it makes you think, I wonder how much Denbrock being in South Bend now kind of ignited that fire under Blake to think, you know what, maybe this is an offense that could best be fitted with my skill set. So interested to see how that plays out when he gets here, and how they'll utilize him in that room with a lot of depth already.
Right, because that's the thing, though, Trevor. Right, like this is a different offense. This is an offense with a coach whose last quarterback's the number 2 overall draft pick and is lighting it up in the NFL. From what I haven't watched any games, so I'm looking at the stats. Like, that's rookie. That's not rookie stats, right?
Yeah.
And the quarterback before that was a 3rd round draft pick, and the quarterback before that was a 2nd round draft pick. And Deshaun Kaiser, like literally the last, 3 quarterbacks that Mike Denbrock had as multi-year starters were drafted in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. That's a pretty good track record. And now he can say, hey, listen, clearly this is a young man that values education. Look at the schools he's attended and got, you know what I mean, in high school. And so he gets a chance to get a top-notch education, and he gets to play for a program that's a championship caliber program, or is at least in the process of taking that next step to become one. They're a championship competing program, right? I don't know if they're championship caliber yet. They're working towards that for sure. And showing up the quarterback position is going to be a big part of that, which is why it's so important to get Kenny Minchie. It's why it's so important to get CJ Carr. It's why it's so important to get Noah Grubbs, and why it's important to get a kid in this class. And the reason I leave Steve Angeli out is because I'm focusing on what this current staff did, and Steve was already here when this current staff got hired. So I'm just focusing on this staff overall changing the fortunes of the quarterback position. So they were able to go get that, and now you've got someone that you can help close the deal with Jalen Cooper. I think that's a very important final piece to this. Now, if they want to add a 5th receiver, great. There's some guys on the board, whether they flip Isaiah Mizell, whether they try to flip a Derek Meadows or someone like him, whether they decide to do it with a portal guy, I don't care. Jalen Cooper is a vitally important piece to this. And I'll just say this, they did a great job with him this weekend, Trevor. Great job. Getting this kind of kid at quarterback in his class with what is around it, it could be the thing that maybe is that final decision maker. And when you talk about class impact, things like that can help a bunch, Trevor, can help a bunch. If a kid's like on the fence of like really like Notre Dame, but I'm back and forth, and then boom, oh, wow, they got a really talented quarterback. Let me pop in the film. That kid's got a hose, right? Which we'll talk about here in a minute. Those are certainly things that are going to have an impact, could have an impact on that. And then, of course, with 26 receivers, it's like, look, we've got a quarterback in our class and Noah Grubbs, but dude, they got a guy in 25. They got a guy in 24, and Notre Dame's going to have a pretty good quarterback. I don't know who it's going to be, but they're going to have a pretty good quarterback. It helps your sales pitch to receivers as you're building your offense to have the production that sells, right? Because like right now, they don't have the pass game production that sells. They don't. We're not going to sit here and try to spin it to you that they do. They haven't put a receiver into the first round of the NFL draft since 2016. They haven't had a receiver drafted, period, that played more than a year at Notre Dame since 2020, right? The last guy that got drafted, Ben Skoranek, was a 7th round pick, but he was a guy that was not developed by Notre Dame. He played 1 year at Notre Dame. So, this is a thing that helps as you look to build that part of your program, which you can't change overnight. You can say, yeah, we're getting there, but this is why they brought me in, is to change that. But look who's going to be throwing you the football. So I think that's the biggest potential class impact that could have. And if teams are trying to flip Elijah Burris or trying to flip Scrap Richardson as we get closer to signing day, flip James Flanagan, which I don't know why he'd waste time trying to flip James Flanagan, but whatever. If you're trying to flip Will Black or Matty Augustine or anybody else in the class on offense, now it's like, nope, they got a quarterback. This is going to help solidify the direction that this class is going. All right. So that must have been great commentary. Trevor's so riveted by it. He has nothing. I left him speechless, everybody. I love it. So, Trevor, next thing we'll do is we're going to dive into some film of this kid. And I know you watched a little, you refreshed on him a little bit here before the show, and I did as well. And man, I can, this is going to be fun to watch because you guys are going to like this film. You're going to see the film. And I think if you guys are going to like it like we did, and I actually think we've broken his film down before on the show. I actually went back and looked at, so on the Irish Breakdown message board, it's actually kind of cool. I mean, the board is cool, but this feature is also cool. You can type in, name of Blake Hebert, and I could go down and find old posts that I made about Blake Hebert. Be like, okay, what was I saying at the time? Like, I think I remember liking him, but let me go back and see And I'm like, strong arm, talented, like this kid a lot, so I went back and looked at it and I'm like, yeah, okay. My reaction now is what was similar to what I was saying back then. And so I did the same thing, looking through some of my old text messages, because I don't delete text messages, and just trying to find some comments that I made about this kid back then. And so, I'm looking at some different comments and found some discussion pieces where early on in the process, I was given a list of quarterbacks to keep an eye on that the Notre Dame staff was really high on. Deuce was in there. Bryce Underwood was in there. George McIntyre was in there. KJ Lacey was in there. Blake Hebert was in there. So, it is a kid that you like. It is a kid that you liked. And so, really big pickup for Notre Dame, Trevor. And we're going to pop into film, and I think you guys are all going to see why Trevor and I are high on this kid. And the first thing you're going to notice, Trevor, is he's got a really nice pocket quarterback. This is sophomore film, by the way, because he missed his junior film with an injury, and I don't have highlights of his senior season that we can show here. But you're going to see really nice frame, kid who's 6'3", 215. This sophomore film, he throws from his own 47, flicks the wrist, and the ball gets to the goal line. That's a 50-plus yard throw, and he did it like it was nothing, Trevor. I mean, that's the first thing I noticed when I'm watching this film, is a very easy power in that right arm for Blake Hebert.
The biggest thing that popped off the page for me with him, outside of just his overall natural arm talent, is for this being his sophomore film, plays with a really good base. And what I mean by that is young quarterbacks have the tendency to overstride.
This clip right here, Trevor, is a great example. Keep talking through it, but this is a great example.
So young quarterbacks have the tendency, when they want to throw it farther downfield, is they have the tendency to overstride. And what I mean by that is, if you're a right-handed quarterback, your left foot, when you go to throw, will be much wider than shoulder width apart when you're going to throw, which causes your release to be all over everywhere. You can't engage your core the way that you need to. So the ball's going everywhere. But Hebert plays with a really strong base. And this is film from when he was, 15, 16 years old. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot to build on here. His pocket presence as a sophomore in high school is really good. He is very comfortable standing in the pocket to make throws downfield, steps into throws well. And as you can see right here, he is he's a sneaky athlete. I'm hesitant on calling him that, because he is not a Riley Leonard with his legs. He's not a Deuce Knight with his legs. But what he did show is he can hurt you on the ground if you don't game plan for him. So gonna be fun to watch him, man. It's gonna be awesome. But the biggest thing that jumped off to me the second that I saw him was how strong of a base he plays with. There's some NFL quarterbacks that don't play with this good of a base.
I'm going to go back to a clip early on, and I'm going to just say this is an example of why I keep saying that Notre Dame needs to find a place for Preston Zinner to play. This throws to Preston Zinner, actually, by the way. Look at this catch that Preston Zinner makes on this. It's a heck of a catch, man. Like, that kid's got to be able to help you somewhere. Yeah. He's got to be able to help you somewhere. But now you talk about the base, Trevor. This is the clip that I was pointing to earlier. I mean, just look how quickly he's not flat-footed, but he's not too hoppy. He's got that nice base, quick slide step, keeps his eyes downfield, resets his feet, and then flicks the ball down the field. About a 15, 20-yard in cut, and he just drills it like it's nothing. You see those type of things, and man, I'll tell you what, that's stuff that you have to like. That's stuff that you look at and say, that's the kind of, you're talking about base. He's effortless with the football. That's going to help with his ball placement. It's going to help him to be accurate. It's going to help him to look, when you have a kid that has to overexert himself, that, number one, it takes longer. It lengthens the throwing process. And it also creates an inaccuracy, because the more you exert yourself, the tighter you grip the ball. The tighter you grip the ball, the more that you have inconsistency with your release point. That's just something that every quarterback knows. And so those things you see on him on film. And the thing is Mike Denbrock wants a quarterback that is a pass-first quarterback. That's a heck of a throw right there, too. Right? He does. He wants a guy that can sit in the pocket, has that big arm, can throw the ball down the field, can move around in the pocket, right? Think about some of the throws Garrett Nussmeier was making on Saturday, where he was sliding left and making big-time throws down the field. this kid can do that, but he's not a stiff either, Trevor. And that's the thing is, like, he's not a guy that you're going to run a bunch of quarterback power and things like that with. You're going to run a different offense with him than you run with Riley Leonard.
Right.
But he's not a kid that you can't run some read zone with. He's not a kid that you can't, do some, if you drop back and teams don't have contain, he can take off and hurt you with his legs as well. And he brings some of that to the table. And that's also important in the Mike Denbrock offense, right? Like, Mike Denbrock wants a guy that's a passer first, but I don't believe he wants a guy that's a stiff guy in the pocket who's going to get sacked a bunch of times. And the way that this kid maneuvers the pocket, like that right there, that's a nice play. That doesn't translate to him being a 700-yard rusher in college against Division I players. But that is something where you can pull a read zone if teams are crashing the backside. You can do the RPO game. If people if people aren't being contained, you can step into the pocket and go make some plays. And so, those are all aspects of it, but this is what they're bringing him in for, Trevor. It's nice, easy, effortless, throwing the ball down the field, driving the ball on out cuts, driving the ball on deep in cuts, and it's just effortless. And like you said, he doesn't have to really drive off that back foot to flick the ball over the field. Look at that. I mean, again, this is another 40-yard throw that he just like it's nothing, gets up and gets down in a hurry, hits the kid right in the hands for a big-time throw. So you just see all those traits and all those tools, Trevor, from this young man. Does a great job keeping his eyes downfield. And that's an example of, look, 3rd and 6, right? He knows where the sticks are. He doesn't start making moves till he gets to the sticks. Watch. He's all right. Boom. I'm going. Okay. Now I got the first down. Let me make this move, pick up a little extra yards, puts his shoulder down and gets on somebody. And this is a kid that's 215 pounds.
Well, and when protection breaks down, you see it that when it's not a designed run or a keep on his own read, he keeps his eyes down the field, which again, can't emphasize enough. Blake Hebert is doing things as a sophomore in high school that not a lot of quarterbacks do during their senior year, right? He is throwing in a great rhythm. He's anticipating throws. He's keeping his eyes down the field when he moves out of the pocket. But again, his arm strength just jumps off the field at you, which is just fantastic to see.
Yeah, it does. And the mobility, people in the chat have talked about his anticipation. He has some of that. It's another nice ball to Preston Zinner there. I mean, we've seen it. We've known about him since they recruited Preston Zinner because we talked about that. This is actually where a kind of far hash-ish, little comeback route that he just throws in the money like it's nothing. Those are all things that you like about this kid. And now at Brunswick School, he's paying a little bit better competition. He played at Lawrence Catholic. But again, we've talked about this. The talent in New Jersey has gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
And they'll also travel out of state to play guys as well. But this is the thing that we talk about here is this ability to extend plays with his legs and keep his eyes downfield is really impressive. Again, this is sophomore film, folks, right? This kid missed his junior season. And we don't have highlights that we can show you from his junior season. I have some game stuff, but we don't have anything that we have as far as highlights. Okay. So you see that ability. He's also a shotgun-based kid, which I think is important. Yep. I think one of the things that Notre Dame had to do, Trevor, is make sure that the injury wasn't something that was going to be long-term. That was also part of this process as well, is that. So you talk about a big-bodied kid. He's already 215 pounds. You see pictures of him. He's a pretty well put together kid. This is another example, just easy, effortless throwing motion right here. Just see it, rip it, snap it out there, get the guy the ball in space, really get anticipation. You can see him going through. You can see him process through film or through reads as well, Trevor. This works in high school, right? This doesn't really work in college as much. But what I like about it is look at the poise, recovers the ball, no panic, gets his eyes downfield, and finds a guy, right? Like, he's probably not going to have that kind of time in college against the good teams. That's not the point about how it translates. It's look at the calm, look at the poise. He doesn't panic. He gets his eyes downfield, resets his feet, and snaps a ball off and hits an open receiver. You see stuff like that, and you're like, boy, this kid's got a lot of ability. A lot of ability.
Can't emphasize it enough. When plays break down, young kids in high school, their first anticipation is to run, especially when you're as athletic as this kid is, right? Mm-hmm. So great poise in the pocket, great awareness of knowing what's going on and knowing what's going on with the play, because he immediately looks up to the route concept that's happening downfield. And it's It's great to watch.
Yeah, he's a talented kid. He's a very talented kid. I mean, you're getting a 6'3", 215-pound kid with a big time arm. If you're not happy about that because of what recruiting services says, that's a you problem. That's not a Notre Dame problem, because this kid is talented. And this kid was ranked very high before the injury. And then obviously missed a year. And since he's committed, there's no reason to continue to pump him up the rankings, because that's not what they do. This kid's talented, very talented football player.
Yep.
And we talked about this when they were recruiting him the first time. This isn't like, oh, Notre Dame got a kid, let's sell a kid. I know that's some of the nonsense that we hear too. The film speaks for itself, folks. I mean, again, another effortless, boom, knock that thing over the top, drop it right over the outside shoulder, big time throw. You know, this is a talented football player, very talented football. There's a lot to work with there, Trevor. A lot to work with for Notre Dame with him as a quarterback. So it's a really good pickup. Really good pick. When I saw that he was the guy, I was like, oh my! I knew they had their guy. I did know that, and I was trying to go through the list of quarterbacks that they had offered, because I was told he probably wasn't going to visit before making a decision. Well, I doubt that a quarterback would visit Notre Dame or commit to Notre Dame if he hadn't visited before. That's a pretty decent list of players, right? And I'm going through the guys that they had offered in the past. I'm like, that kid's talented, but, you know, he's a bit of a project. Well, that kid visited and he didn't get an offer, but, you know, he's talented, but he's a bit of a project. And there's some other names floating around. This kid committed here. This kid committed. Oh, yeah, it's a nice player, but he's a little small. You know, that kid's a nice player, but he's more of a run throw guy. They want more of a passer. That guy's talented, but, you know, he needs time. This kid never crossed my radar, honestly, Trevor, because I was like, well, why would a kid not want to go to Clemson? Like, you know, yeah, you flip a kid from Cal or flip a kid from SMU or flip a kid from, you know, somewhere like North Carolina, but you don't flip a kid from Clemson, are you? And that's exactly what they did, which is, I'll be honest with you, it's surprising. So, I mean, I'm being straight with you guys. I did not know that this was going to be the pick. I knew that they had their guy. I was told they had their guy, but they wouldn't say who it was. Blake Hebert was not on my radar. If I'd have known then, I probably would have been a little bit more excited about the potential of who they're going to land a quarterback in the 2025 class.
Flipping a quarterback from Clemson is massive, and I don't think I can put as enough emphasis on that. Now, if this was a player on defense, I would understand, right? Notre Dame's defensive recruiting has been pretty stellar. I mean, look at how the defense has performed the last couple of years. So, you know, you hear about, you know, if Notre Dame flips a cornerback commit from Clemson, that wouldn't surprise me a whole lot, especially with the production of that room. But a quarterback, flipping a quarterback from Clemson is massive. It's a huge win for Chad Bowden. It's a huge win for Gino Guidugli. So it's very promising to talk about just what the future of recruiting on the offensive side of the football is going to be, which, again, I alluded to it earlier. I think you can give a little bit of credit, some of the credit to, that's part of the Mike Denbrock effect and his resume that he's able to bring to the table and sit down and show some of these kids. And it is refreshing. And this is no disrespect to, you know, former Notre Dame offensive coordinators, but Mike Denbrock has a resume that the others simply did not. So it's really exciting to see what you can do and sit down at the table and say, hey, listen, this is what it can look like in our offense, and this is where we see you fitting in, and this is where your skill set benefits what we are trying to do long term. So really excited. It's really exciting stuff, man.
Now you look at where Notre Dame is. Obviously, they've got a quarterback in the 25 class, and so a lot of times what we'll do is we'll kind of talk about what's next. Well, what's next is Notre Dame already has a kid committed in the 26 class, a very talented player committed in the 2026 class in Noah Grubb. So now Notre Dame can truly focus, again, all of its 2027 quarterback efforts. Actually, I shouldn't even say again. They can finally start focusing their 2027 or their quarterback efforts on 2027 players. And they now can use three quarterbacks to sell to receivers in 26, because this is going to sound crazy because he's so young. But Kenny Minchey's going to be a senior when the 26 class shows up to college. You're not selling a senior to juniors and like juniors and high school. You're selling kids that they're going to play with. And they would only play with Kenny for 1 year, which is crazy how far advanced we are in recruiting right now. But when you look at quarterback recruiting, they couldn't really focus on 2027. There was like a little period after Noah Grubb's committed for like a month where they started looking at 27 kids, and then all of a sudden Deuce starts talking to Auburn again, and he plays his whole game and all that ridiculousness. And then Notre Dame had to put a lot of effort into him. And then Notre Dame also spent the last month or so kind of looking around at other quarterbacks to see where they would want to go. Because, when Deuce decommitted, it was when they kind of, okay, now we can officially turn the page. They were talking to other quarterbacks before that. And I don't know this for a fact because I want to make sure that I differentiate between what I know and what I think. I know that they were talking to other quarterbacks. I am assuming, and I think that this would be one of them, which is why this process happened only a couple weeks after Deuce decommitted. I don't think when he decommitted, they called up Blake Hebert and said, hey, man, you want to flip? Yeah, coach, sure. It's Tuesday. I got nothing else going on. You know what I mean? Like, this was a process. And I know he liked Clemson a lot, and I know he had a good relationship with the Clemson staff as well. So I do think this process has been in the works for a while. Again, that's my opinion based on the things I have been told about the 25 quarterback process, but I never got names. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that, because I always want to be sure that people know the difference between what I know and what I think. And I think this is a kid that was part of that early push. And I think it's partly why they were so secretive about it, because you don't want to give Clemson that much time to convince him to stay. And so this was important for Notre Dame. So big pickup. So now they can focus on who their 27 quarterback is going to be. And I don't know that they're going to be in any big hurry to kind of find that guy. I want to say kind of get into the spring and summer. But Notre Dame at quarterback right now, it's looking pretty good. Kenny Minchie, CJ Carr, now Blake Hebert, and Noah Grubbs in a 4-year stretch. That's a really, really good 4-year stretch of football, quarterback recruiting for this Notre Dame football team.
It's flipping the narrative that Notre Dame can't recruit quarterbacks at a high level. And it's exciting to see what is going to be kind of the byproduct of getting these quarterbacks, because you alluded to it earlier and you touched on it about how getting a good quarterback within your class helps get other big offensive commits, because it's about building chemistry with the guys that you're coming in with. And that is a factor to recruiting. It's not easy enough to say like, oh, well, you're a true like you'd be a true freshman in the fall. Come in. We have CJ Carr who will leave when you're 19 years old. Like, you know what I mean? So it is huge. That's why you continually recruit quarterbacks. And now Notre Dame is starting to show that they can recruit quarterbacks at a high level, which is something that in my lifetime, you had that stretch when you got, Malik and Deshaun and Brandon Wimbush. But outside of that, it was very sporadic. Like my entire childhood, it was very sporadic. So this is awesome to see them starting to pick up a head of steam and go from there.
Absolutely. So we're going to move on to the other commitment here in a minute. But before we do, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And if you've not done so, sign up for the message board at boards.oursbreakdown.com. You've seen the update today. Again, I knew it was going to happen soon. I didn't necessarily know that this was all going to happen today. But you'd have gotten a little bit of a heads up if you know how to read between the tea leaves with what I say, because what we have a thing where we're not going to steal another kid. We're not going to steal a kid's moment, right? And getting the clicks and getting the signups is not worth stealing a kid's moment. But I will drop enough clues that you can kind of have an idea of that things are coming. And this is one of those examples where I kind of felt like there's some work done, and they're not done yet on the 25 class because they're still trying to recruit a running back. They are still trying to land. They landed another offensive lineman. They're obviously trying to land 2 more linebackers. They want at least 1. There's a big-time defensive lineman coming on campus in a few weeks that they're trying to flip as well from Florida, and Jalen Wiggins, which we put on the board last week. And they're making a decision on whether or not they're going to take another tight end. There's one kid that I know that they really like that they'd like to land in the class, but we'll kind of see how that goes right now as far as do they have the room and all those type of things. So a lot going on in 25 recruiting. A lot going on. So we're going to get to the offensive lineman next, Trevor. But definitely, plus we're both quarterbacks, so we had to start with the quarterback. So we'll just say we're going in reverse chronological order. Let's say that, and it's not our bias that the quarterback position is near and dear to our hearts. How's that sound? Does that sound like a good justification?
You're the boss.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, so that's the Blake Hebert commitment. Let's dive over to the other commitment that Notre Dame got today, Trevor, which was done this morning. And that was a pickup from an in-state young man, and that's Cameron Herron, who we expected that one. That one was a lot more, okay, yeah, that's a matter of when, not if. And that's that happened today. I wasn't sure that it was going to happen today. I know the staff wanted to meet with him this weekend and do some different things. They didn't need to size him up because they had him on campus this summer, and they know exactly how big he is and how he moves and those type of things. So they were able to get him on campus this weekend. Cameron Herron, who's committed to Iowa. He's a 3-star kid by most of the services. On3 does have him as a 4-star, number 272 overall player in the country. Had been committed to Iowa since June. Camped at Notre Dame this summer. It's a kid that Notre Dame liked, but not enough to move on at the time. And obviously now that they see that they feel that they need that fourth lineman now, they wanted more of a specifically a center type of player. They decided to make the move on Cameron Herron. They've been talking to him for a few weeks. They were able to get him on campus this weekend. Once he committed to take the official visit, Trevor, it was kind of like, okay, now that he's doing that, it's a done deal. And he's the reason why we were late putting our visit list together, is because we knew that there was going to be a surprise visitor, and it ended up being Cameron Herron. So he was on campus this weekend and was able to get out and see Notre Dame in person. They were able to see him in person, and this is where it's at. So he is now a member of the Notre Dame 2025 recruiting class.
Again, I mean, it's good. You have another flip of a commitment from a school that is known for producing good offensive linemen, and they are a run-heavy team in the Big Ten. So, I think that it's a good pickup from him. It's also cool that he goes to Warren Central, so a little bit of homage to Indianapolis, which is pretty cool. So I always like hearing about recruiting stories from athletes around here. I know it's kind of weird, but it makes you think, like, you always hear about when you get recruited to go to a big school, they're coming from California, they're coming from Texas, they're coming from Florida, and this one was right here in the backyard, which is why I followed Blake Fisher pretty closely, because he went to Avon, which is another suburb of Indianapolis. So it's where my wife works. So it's really cool to see. But yeah, it's a good flip. It's a good pickup. Adds depth to the class from an offensive lineman perspective. He plays with really good leverage. He's a relatively athletic interior offensive lineman. Some things where he'll have to fill out a little bit, but I know we're going to dive into the film here pretty soon. But man, above all, it's a good get.
Let's dive into the class impact for Cameron Herron. And obviously Notre Dame has 3 kids committed in the class right now. You have Will Black, who I grade as a top 100 player, Owen Streebig, who's a top 100 player on my board, and then also Maddie Augustine, who I have as a top 250 player with a very high ceiling. Maddie Augustine's ceiling, in my opinion, is actually higher than Owen Streebig's. He's just got a lower floor, which is why Owen Streebig grades out higher. Now, they both have, I believe I have them both at 4.5-star upside grades. Will Black is now bumped up to a 5-star upside grade after I watched his senior film. I'm not quite there with the 5-star now stuff yet, but the film so far as a senior season is very impressive. So this young man joins that, but those are 3 tackle bodies. Will Black, 6'7", 295. Owen Streebig is like 6'8", 290. Maddie Augustine, 6'6", long. He's up to I've been told he's up to about 285, 290 now, as a senior, and he's moving very well. I've seen a little bit of film of him, watching some of the stuff on Blake Hebert. You'll see obviously Maddie Augustine playing for him, and very talented football player, Trevor. And so the thought coming in was, look, 3 was the number. They thought about taking a 4th. They decided to pass on a couple guys. Jack Lang being one of them that they decided to pass on and not take. They were going to take a 4th, but it had to be like a dude. I know they like Josh Petty a lot, but since then the staff has kind of changed their tune, and they decided they wanted a 4th offensive lineman, and they wanted that player to specifically be a center type of player. Now, I believe Owen Streebig and maybe Maddie Augustine could also eventually move to guard, but neither of those guys are really going to be centers. They're way too long to be centers. And length isn't a great thing, which is interesting because this kid has a lot of length, but he's at least kind of short and stubby, so there's some things you can do. But a big high-cut, long-arm center is going to have a very slow snapping process. And so that's part of the reason centers tend to, not always, no, you'll find some 6'6" centers out there. They tend to be on the shorter side for those type of reasons. So this is a kid that they viewed as a center, and it was a specific need, not just a fourth lineman, but there was a specific need that they were looking for, and that's why Cameron Herron was their choice. Whether you agree with it, don't agree with it, like him, don't like him, that's not the point. The point is this is just explain why he was the pick, and he was the pick because this is what the staff viewed they needed in this class. And I believe that some people have said, well, hey, are they going to lose somebody? And there's always that threat in the modern world. But I think this had more to do with not really feeling great about the true centers. I mean, you've got Ashton Craig, who's going to be a senior next year. You've got Joe Wadding, who I know the staff likes, and that's it right now at center. You've got Pat Coogan, who's starting there now, but he's a senior. He'll be a fifth year next year. So you're starting to think about 25, 26, 27 offensive class. You may not have Ashton Craig on those 26, 27 teams. You're definitely not going to have Pat Coogan. You'll have Joe Wadding, but who are the other centers? No one in last year's class is really projecting a center as much now that Anthony Knapp's playing tackle, because that was a guy that they kind of viewed as being maybe a center down the road. He's starting left tackle now, so you have to take that into account as well. I think that's the reason why, along with the fact that you're now going to have 105 scholarships to deal with next season, that Notre Dame felt comfortable taking a kid like Cameron Herron and now fitting him into that class. And it's interesting. We've always said you look at those three offensive linemen next to each other, and there's Matty Augustine at 6'6" with his shoulders crossed, and all the linemen are like this, and you're like, Matty Augustine is like 6'6", and he's not nearly as tall as the other two kids, right? Now you throw in Cameron Herron, who this summer at Notre Dame measured in at 6'2.5". That's going to be a fun-looking picture when you see that group of four guys standing next to each other. It's 6'8", 6'7", 6'6", and then 6'2.5" down here, Cameron Herron. But again, he's going to be right in the center of that line, and that's you can get away with that lack of maybe height, which I don't care as much about height for linemen, but you don't see a lot of 6'2" centers, left tackles. There's exceptions like Isaiah Wynn from Georgia a few years ago, but you don't see him a lot, Trevor, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, all those guys standing next to each other is going to look like me next to a lot of my groomsmen. And I'm not a short guy by any means, but I'm like 6 foot, 6'1" with shoes, but 6 foot tall. And I had groomsmen. My groomsmen went 6'6", 6'5", 6'3". And so, we took the pictures with me in the middle and everybody kind of branching out. And it was very much how I imagine Cameron Herron looking standing next to some of those guys. But yeah, I mean, he's an athletic guy. I like the move to add him, especially with, it's a depth piece at center. And one thing that Mike Denbrock has shown this year is that he will pull Pat Coogan to be lead blockers on certain counters and on quarterback counters. So getting an athletic center like this guy, I like the move. So interested to see where he's going to fill in and like what his spot is going to be and what the role is going to be on the team. But I'm excited to see it.
So let's dive into the film, Trevor, and we're going to take a look at Cameron Herron, and we'll talk about the things we like about him, and then some of the things that I'll be honest with you, I'm a little concerned about when you watch this film. I saw him in camp this summer, and he was solid. He didn't blow me away. Moves relatively well. He's quicker than he is kind of long speed. He's very good in short areas. He doesn't have I didn't view him as like that super twitchy athletic guy that's going to be wrapping around all the time and getting out to the perimeter. But in his short space, he did show some that initial quick change of direction. The wild thing is I didn't see long arms on when I saw him this summer. I didn't. And I'll be honest with you, I don't necessarily see super long arms on film, and I could just be missing it. But he measured in this summer at Notre Dame with 35-inch arms, which is really long arms. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. But let's check out the film and take a peek at Cameron Herron. And the first thing you're going to see, again, he's a little bit sawed off. He's not the thickest kid in the world. You see that quick trap motion, a little tight-hipped. You can see it there, but he does have that initial quickness. He's very much a try-hard guy, Trevor. He's a very powerful kid. He competes. He battles. You can see that there, a little bit of that little extra edge to him. He's an undersized kid. He's at left guard, by the way, number 58. There's another quick trap. Want to see him use his hands a little bit better there, but he is a physical kid. There's no doubt about that, Trevor. He's going to compete and fight and really get after in the run game. And that's what you're bringing him in here to do, right? Is to get out, kind of use that leverage, get after in the run game. and try to get moving. I think he can work up to the second level relatively well, but that's where you're getting him right there, Trevor. That's what you want to see from him right there is that it's coming off the line. I'd like to see him get his pads a little. He doesn't play with super pad level for a guy that's only 6'2.5".
Yeah,
because he bends at the hip a lot. I want to see him kind of work on that. That's a nice job right there. But he's not real consistent with it, Trevor. But you see him move those feet. He's got nice foot quickness, and he's a pretty strong kid. That's definitely something you see on film.
He does a good job at finishing blocks that I've noticed too. I would like to see a little bit more drive instead of that shoulder check that he does a little bit to finish some blocks. But that's going to be one of the things that through development, you're not going to be able to do that to a collegiate defensive end.
Like this guy gets underneath him a little bit. He does a good job of recovering, but like when you're that size, you got to be winning the low man off the line battle all the time. When you're 6'2.5", 275 pounds, you've definitely got to win that battle. But he said, like, those are all coaching things that they can be worked on. He's a very tough kid. He's honestly going to be a lot like Pat Coogan, space guy, quick traps. He's not going to be that super athletic, fly him all over the field kind of center, Yeah, it's just not who he is. But you're looking for a tough mauler type of kid, which is what Joe Rudolph seems to like. Hey, who cares about pass pro? He can maul in the run game, right? So what if the left tackle can't protect the quarterback? He can run block like a champ. That's at least what we've seen this season anyway. So, yeah, he's a tough kid. He fits that mold of the attitude you're trying to get into the program. See more of him here. Now, one thing, Indianapolis does have good football. Like Indiana as a whole does not have great football. It doesn't. Indianapolis and Fort Wayne are the two areas in the state where you see a lot of good football, and Indianapolis is number one on that list. And when I've ever been in staffs that recruited Indiana, those are the two places we went. There was only one kid I recruited out of South Bend, and that was Jesse Stiers. Everywhere else we recruited was Indianapolis or Fort Wayne. And that's where we had a lot of our success. I had an all-freshman receiver at Defiance in 2013. 2013. He was a kid from, I think, Lawrence North, I think. Trey White, really good player. There's good. There is, so you're going to get a kid that's played against good competition, and you don't have a lot of that in the state of Indiana.
Yeah, Indian surrounding areas has really strong high school football. So the competition that he is playing against is up there for sure.
Mm-hmm. You see this a lot, Trevor. You talk about he does have a little bit of that edge to him.
Yeah.
Where he wants to smack people, man.
Yeah.
He wants to smack people. Sometimes that little man syndrome can sometimes be a good thing for you. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I got to play a little extra harder. I got to play, and I'm being serious. Like, I got to play a little extra tougher. I got to have a little bit extra attitude if I'm going to be a Division I offensive lineman at 6'2", 275 pounds, right? I mean, you've got to have that little extra something to you.
Hey, man, sometimes, 100%. He kind of reminds me. He's like the Bonzie Colson of offensive linemen.
Yeah, I like that.
Just he plays at the 4. He's kind of a stretch 3, but he's only 6'5", but he has like an 80-inch wingspan, so he can just guard anybody. I mean, sometimes you just kind of need that guy like that just plays with the chip on his shoulder and just loves contact. I mean, that's what you want out of an offensive lineman, just somebody that loves hitting people.
Yeah. Michael Johnson, just real quick, the uniforms do look similar, but Blake Fisher played at Avon. This is Warren Central. This is where Sheldon Day went to high school. This is Sheldon's high school. This is a clip, Trevor, right here, but like these are the type of things where they do concern me a little bit. You can see a kid that's a little tight. His ankles are a little tight. His hips are a little tight. He doesn't bend well enough at the knees. Like that's something that he's going to have to – I don't know if it can be improved on. Maybe it's a technical thing. I'd have to see, but you see that, and that's why you say he's a pure center, in my opinion. Maybe could be a power guard, but I think he's a guy that you really have to project at center. And I was glad to see that as a senior he was actually playing a little bit of center and seems to snap the ball pretty well. Good zip, good accuracy from what we've seen. So there's some things to work with there. But the fight is why they are, you like this kid. And again, his short area quickness is pretty good.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that long speed that you kind of look for in an offensive lineman, screens and being elite on the second level and things like that. But short area, there's a lot to work with. And he does have powerful hands. I mean, just this isn't necessarily a great example because that kid's kind of small, but he strikes people, man. And he does have long arms. I just didn't see 35 inches. You know what I'm saying? Like that's my thing.
Sure. He has a strong punch, and he definitely has a good foundation that the offensive coaches can work with. I think that's going to be the biggest thing with this kid, because there are some things where a lot of time
it's a really nice pull right here, by the way.
That is.
Sorry, keep going, Trevor. Yeah.
There are times when he is on the interior of the offensive line, he's very quick to stand up, like very quick to be vertical, which again, I do think that that's a thing with coaching. Once you get to that level, you start playing lower, the pad level has to be lower. But the concern is he's a 6'2" interior offensive lineman, and the initial thought shouldn't be coming straight vertical, but
right.
Things to work on and things to improve, but he does show some good short burst quickness. I don't think he's a guy that's going to be lead blocking on a screen 20 yards down the field, but he finishes blocks well. Dude
that
just
extension
loves contact.
Look at that extension, though. That's nice stuff. But again, this is this is terrible technique, but that's something right there that can be corrected.
Mm-hmm.
You lunge like that against a Division I defensive tackle, he's going to throw you to the ground.
Yeah.
You're not doing that to him. But those are things that you always look. So, okay, is this something that can be corrected, or is this the problem that's going to hurt him? Well, it's going to hurt him if he doesn't fix it, but it can be corrected. So, like you said, are you getting a high ceiling player? No. Are you getting a kid with a pretty decent floor? I think so. Are you getting a kid that brings some of the demeanor that you're looking for more of in the offensive line? Yes. You're getting a fighter. You're getting a scrapper. You're getting a kid that's going to get after it. You're getting a kid, too, that works to try to earn this scholarship. Part of the reason he gets this scholarship is because he came to camp this summer, competed his butt off for it in front of the Notre Dame coaches. And even though it didn't work out at the time, it has now, and that's something that I look for and I like. I like the fact that they have multiple colored helmets. You don't see that in high school teams a whole lot, Trevor. Looking like Wake Forest right now out there. But, again, played both guard, played both center. I'm sure he could play some guard, but center's the preference for him right now. Yeah.
Well, and I think one thing that's promising, too, is he was flipped from Iowa. You know what I mean? Like, This was a guy where Iowa looked at and they were like, no, we want you to come here, offer you a scholarship. He went through the commitment process. So that is another thing that does make me feel a little bit better, because the coaches, somebody at a higher level than me and what I'm qualified to do, looked at this kid, and there were like multiple schools now have been like, there's something here that can be built upon.
I've had some concerns. I'll be honest. I've had some concerns about Iowa's offensive line in the last several years. Like maybe Kirk Ferentz is losing his touch, but there was a time not that long ago, Trevor, where if Kirk Ferentz offered a Midwestern lineman, I paused. Let me see. Let me look at that kid again. I didn't like his film initially, but Kirk Ferentz wants this kid, so let me go back and watch that kid's film again, because Kirk Ferentz knows more about offensive line play than I do. You know what I mean?
Right.
And even though it's still Kirk Ferentz, and you like to think that maybe the new offensive line coach, who's not his son, who is developing actually a good offensive line finally at Iowa again, maybe he saw this kid and saw something he liked as well as Kirk Ferentz. So that does. To your point, that does add a little something to it, Trevor. When I've said this before, like, I don't care about certain schools offering every kid at every position. Oh, Ohio State offered that kid. All right, I don't care. Like they don't have the reputation of recruiting or developing that type of player like they do receiver. If Ohio State offers a receiver, I'm paying attention. If they offer a guard, I'm not as concerned about that. But Notre Dame should go after the kid because who's got a better track record of producing NFL linemen the last 10 years, Notre Dame or Ohio State, right? But when you look at Iowa, they're one of those schools. Wisconsin used to be this way for me, Trevor.
Yeah.
They used to be one of those schools where I'd say, hey, look, if Wisconsin wants a kid, I'm taking a second look at them. You know what I mean? And Michigan used to be that way too. Like if you were in a battle for Michigan for an offensive lineman back in the day, you knew you were getting yourself a good football player more often than not.
Sure.
And then, of course, Notre Dame became that program under Harry Hiestand. Like if Harry wanted a guy, all of a sudden this kid's offer list would take off. You know what I mean? So And hopefully this kid is like that. But like you said, there's some tools to work with. This is not a top 100 kid. This is for me, he's a 3.5-star kid with a 4-star upside is what I graded him at, Trevor. And it's going to be like some other guys. Can he fill out that frame? Can he get up to 300 and still move the way he does? Can he improve the technical aspects of his games, things like that? So there's certainly some things to work with, and he's a quality prospect. He's a quality prospect. He's a much different prospect than the other three they landed too, not just in size, but those guys are all super high ceiling guys. This is a little bit more of an attitude guy, a fighter type of kid, a mauler type of kid, plays with a little bit of an edge. He's being brought in for a specific role, and hopefully he'll play that role well. We'll see.
100%.
So, Trevor, that is it for Cameron Herron. As far as what's next, obviously Notre Dame is done with offensive linemen for the 2025 class. Now they're going to get back to, they've still been putting together their 26 board. Notre Dame is obviously on a lot of kids. We've seen Sullivan Garvin got offered recently. I know that Ben Nichols was on campus recently. There's a lot of other kids on the board. I'm drawing a complete blank on the kid from Pennsylvania that I like. Tyler Merrill. So I know a guy that they like a lot. There's a kid from Virginia that they've talking to that I'm really hoping that they offer at some point in time. There was a camp this summer. So they're putting that 26 board together. Kid like this gives you a little bit more more leeway numbers-wise next year. You don't have to go big in numbers next year if this kid gets on campus and looks the way that he does. So I like it, man. I like where they're at. I like the offensive line class. I'm okay taking a kid like this. I'd have been okay if they stuck with the three they had. I'm okay with taking a kid like this. And, certainly it's always good to get an in-state kid. Right? Like I always like when they get in-state kids, and this is another in-state kid that they've landed. So that's Cameron Herron. So Trevor, we have a couple super chats that I want to get to before we get out of here. Got one from Anthony Solomon. Anthony says, super chat for Angela throwing Brian under the bus. That's how the show started today, folks. We weren't even started yet, and Angela threw me under the bus. She told people that I was up there talking to her, but I was doing that because I was trying to do Vince a favor. Mm-hmm. And then this is what I get, Trevor. This is what I get. I get thrown completely under the bus.
Jeez.
Yep. And then I asked Angela to do me a favor earlier. I said, hey, could you do me this favor to help Vince out? And her response was, no, I'm busy in the chat. So I was like, seriously? So that's why I was laughing earlier. Super chat from Jeremy Snell. What's up, Brian Jerboski? Giving some props. I appreciate you, man. Miss not having you on the board anymore, man. I hope you're back sometime soon. But we'll love to hear your thoughts on these two pickups. I appreciate the super chat. Dan Benami with a super chat. Knowing what we know now in hindsight, would you still gone after Deuce or taken Bear Bachmeier a while ago? What was Herbert's main reason to flip to Notre Dame? We haven't talked to him yet, so I don't know that main reason yet. And we'll hopefully get a story coming out here soon. But would not change a thing about quarterback recruiting because at the end of the day, Blake Hebert's a better player than Bear Bachmeier. So if you had to go through this weird twisted road with Deuce to get to this point where you've got Blake Hebert as your quarterback, I'm good. Like that doesn't mean I didn't want Deuce. Deuce is a great talent. I would have preferred Deuce to have stayed in the class. But I would rather have landed Deuce. Bear goes to Stanford. Deuce leaves and you end up with Blake Hebert than to have saying we're not going to take a chance on Deuce. Let's go and get Bear Bachmeier. I'm glad that, and I liked Bear. Bear's a good prospect. This isn't a knock on him. I just think this kid is better, and I think this kid is a better fit for Mike Denbrock's offense. Like Bear Bachmeier is a lot like the kid that TCU had a couple years ago, right? You know what I mean? Like he's that type of the Max Duggan type of kid, the gamer. Okay. He's not like a drop back, throw for 4,000 yards, look pretty, future, big, tall, 6'3", 2. He's a gamer. He can throw, he can run. He's a gamer. And they wanted a guy that's more drop back, hurt you, move around, that type of thing, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with a Max Duggan. Dude led TCU to a national championship game, and they've been pretty garbage since he left. You know what I mean? So it's just that's not necessarily what Notre Dame is looking for, ideally at quarterback. And as much as I like Bear, I think think about the offense we just watched Stanford run on Saturday. I can't wait to watch Bear Bachmeier in that offense. He's going to be really good in that offense, in my opinion. he fits that offense better than he fits Notre Dame's offense. And Blake Hebert not only is a better prospect than Bear, in my opinion, he's a better fit for this offense also. And so that is where we're at.
Yeah.
Somebody asked a question, Brian, who would you rate higher if in the same class, Hebert or Angeli? It's Hebert. I had Steve Angeli's a 3.5-star quarterback. I have Blake Hebert as a borderline top 100 prospect. That's what I think of Blake Hebert. I love this kid. I also found a conversation that Ryan and I had back when when was this? This is back in 2023, where Ryan and I were talking about Blake Hebert. And I'm like, this is back in May when Notre Dame was looking at him. And we were talking about how much we liked him and how live his arm was and stuff like this. So this is a kid that we liked a lot back then as well. So this is a really nice flip in that regard. So he would definitely be higher. Aiden Benami, is it okay in these times to not get a quarterback in the class? I don't think so. No, I think you always need at least a guy that's said Steve Angeli's the floor at quarterback for me. And what I mean by that is give me that game, because Steve Angeli's got a lot of gamer in him also. You know, he's not that, he doesn't have a big arm. He's not super accurate from a ball placement standpoint. He's solid in that regard. He's got there's things you can pick apart about Steve Angeli, but the kid's going to go out there and compete, right? And you know that your floor as a team is like minimum 9-3, maybe 10, 11 wins if you got enough around him. But is he enough to go win you 4 playoff games? No, I don't think he is. But you got a kid like that, you can win a lot of games with a kid like that. And I can live with that. But I want a higher floor and a higher ceiling from a quarterback, and I think Blake Hebert has that. So, and I think you always need at least a minimum of a Steve Angeli in a class. Now, what you can't do is have 3 or 4 guys like that in a row. At some point in time, you need a Minchie or a Carr or guys like that as well. And so the more high talent, high ceiling guys you have, the greater your odds of one of them hitting. And obviously that's going to be an important part of this, Trevor. What are your thoughts on it? I guess I was in a situation where maybe you got 2 the year before, and one of those kids is a program guy that his dad played in Notre Dame. He's not going to leave. Maybe then, but even then, Trevor, I still feel like you need a quarterback every year.
I think there's an extenuating circumstance where you don't take a quarterback, but that's very rare. Like if you have, if you get a young transfer that comes in that likes what the program is doing, and you also have the same quarterback that you recruited in that class, maybe. But I think with this day and age of the transfer portal and with NIL, and now players are opting out and redshirting and just not finishing seasons, like I don't think teams can afford that, because you are one injury away, one transfer away from being in a scenario where it's like, okay, well, senior's hurt. We have a junior who can win us some games and a true freshman that has yet to take a meaningful snap. So you never want to put yourself in a position where your hands are kind of tied behind your back and you have to start making decisions out of necessity. So I will always err on the side of getting at least a Steve Angeli-esque type of quarterback. And that's a good thing. That's not an insult. That is, look, if the quote unquote worst case scenario for me is this kid from Jersey that's a decent sized quarterback that has proven that he can produce in an offense, and to Brian's point, is a gamer, like a
leader, liked by his teammates. Sure.
Yeah, he'll lower his shoulder to get the extra 2 yards. He'll if there's any credit to Steve Angeli, if he ever goes out and throws an interception, he will be unfazed and he will come back out the next drive on offense and lead him down the field. That's the kind of guy that Steve Angeli is. So again, if that's the quote unquote floor, the worst case scenario, that's okay.
Yeah. All right, got a super chat from Tom Chris 2488. Thank you so much for the super chat. I know he missed his junior year due to an ankle injury, but how do you compare Hebert to Grubbs at this point? Who would you choose to start after Carr based on current info? Go Irish. I honestly don't. Tom, I want to say this. I don't really get into the who would I choose to start based on what we've done in high school. Like I had CJ Carr ranked higher than Kenny Minchie coming out of high school. If Kenny Minchie outplays CJ Carr, start Kenny. Right? If I have CJ Carr ranked higher than Blake Hebert, but if Blake Hebert comes in and outplays CJ Carr, play him. If I felt Steve Angeli outplayed those guys, I would say play him. I don't get into that. I think I don't think he has outplayed them, in my personal opinion. It's a different conversation for a different day. But honestly, I don't really care between the two. What I would say is there's a lot of similarities between Noah Grubbs and Blake Hebert. Similar body types, similar arm motion, similar athleticism. Although I think Blake is a stronger, more agile player in the pocket than Noah. Noah's sort of developing that part of his game. Like Noah's trying to get there as a junior to where Blake was as a sophomore in regard to sort of moving his feet in the pocket. Yeah. Both have really live arms. Noah has tons of production, and Noah's probably a little bit maybe more dynamic with some of the off platform type of throws, changing arm angles, things like that. They're very similar players in a lot of ways. There's things I think Noah does better. There's things I think Blake does better. They're both really talented kids, and I'm looking forward to seeing both of their developments as we go through the next year. Thoughts on that? Kind of feel the same way, Trevor? I saw you nodding your head. Feel the same way?
Yeah. Same boat.
And then we have a super chat that has nothing to do with the show that we're talking about now. But we'll answer it anyway because I do appreciate the super chat. But Indy Milton fan, I literally did a whole show I published about this a couple hours ago on should the staff go after Jaden Mickey. My answer is no. And if you want to get my whole breakdown on it, I put it, it's published on Irish Breakdown. There's a video I put out. It's about the Benjamin Morrison injury. And essentially my answer is no. He decided he didn't want to be part of this team anymore. He quit on his teammates for whatever reason, justified or not, whatever you feel about that is irrelevant. He, for whatever reason, whether he supported him, didn't support or whatever, he quit on his teammates. And what message are you sending to Carson Hobbs and everybody else on the team who didn't quit, that if you go out and convince him to come back? And I just would not do that. I'm going to roll with the guys that you have. And that's it. Plus, you lost a boundary cornerback. Jaden Mickey's a field cornerback. He doesn't really help you with the Benjamin Morrison loss. He really helps you with more of the depth in case something happens to Christian Gray. But how bought in is he going to be on a team where he's going to be okay coming back and being a backup? Because he's not starting. He was already passed up by Leonard Moore. So the only way Jaden Mickey's going to start is if somebody else gets hurt. So why would you convince a guy to come back who clearly didn't want to be a backup on your team to come back and be a backup? I'm good. Could hurt the team. I get all that. He should have thought about that before he quit on the team. For whatever you feel, justified or not, I support the kid or not. This isn't about rightness or wrongness of his decision. It's just the decision was the decision. You can say, well, he didn't really quit. Yeah, he quit. He was on the team. He's no longer on the team. He's the one that made the decision not be on the team. That's quitting. I mean, Trevor, if you called me tomorrow and said, hey, man, I'm going to go do this thing, and say, well, but I didn't quit. Well, yeah, you did. You were working for me one day. You decided you want to work somewhere else the next day. I don't know what else to call that. You know what I mean? I mean, you could spin it some type of way, but he quit.
Yeah.
He decided he wanted to be part of the team. Well, they need him now. Well, we knew that at the time that they might need him now. So he didn't care enough then. So I think I'd rather go with Carson Hobbs, who's more obviously invested. You think Carson Hobbs is happy sitting on the bench? Of course not. But he stuck with it. He didn't quit. He's out there competing every day. I'm going to roll with those kids than the guy that decided he didn't want to be on a team anymore because it was best for him to do something else.
Yeah, I agree completely. And it's not like when Jaden Mickey made the decision to leave the team, whether it was justified or not, it's not like that cornerback room was screaming with depth at that point in time. I mean, you had Ben Morrison, Christian Gray, who was a first-year starter, Jaden Mickey, who was a rotational piece, and two true freshmen. Like, it's not like it was just this loaded room. But no, I agree with you 100%. I won't dive too much into that. I will say I saw a comment in the chat that said I'm too young to understand a Mean Girls reference, which I am not. Love Mean Girls. It's a hilarious movie. Just want to clear the air.
Never saw that.
Mean Girls
Who's in that?
Mean Girls is a funny movie.
Who's in it?
Worth it. It is. I mean, it's Lindsay Lohan. It's one of Rachel McAdams' first movies. It's very much.
You're not that young.
No. I mean, the movie came out in the early 2000s. I saw it growing up.
There you go. There you go. All right, so that's going to do it. So, an Indy Milton fan, I appreciate that. But if you want to get a longer explanation for me on why I wouldn't do that, you can go check it out. So, there you have it. So, Trevor, man, thank you. This is your first impromptu Notre Dame recruiting show. So, I figured getting a quarterback to commit would be a great one to kind of get onto. So I appreciate you being a part of it. Somebody said, LOL, Brian has seen it. Guys, I've admitted that I watch Hallmark movies with my wife. Do you think I'd have a problem admitting I watched Mean Girls if I'd seen it? I haven't seen it. I'm married 16 years. There's a lot of movies I would admit to seeing it. And Angela can tell y'all, I've never seen that movie. She's never seen that movie with me anyway. So, no, I have not seen that movie. And I would admit it if I did. Why would I not admit it if I did? I've seen The Notebook like 10 times. You know what I mean? Like, why would I not admit to seeing that? You know what I'm saying? So, he said, Angela, we want to fact check. Yeah. Tyler, and I'm not going to – you can't even spell my name right. So, I don't even want to hear you talking about what movie I haven't seen. Yeah. You did it twice.
Jeez, come on, Byron.
All right, man. Well, Trevor, thanks for being with me today, man. I enjoyed it. We'll be back. You and I will be back tomorrow at 1:00. We are going to talk more about this Notre Dame Georgia Tech game coming up this weekend. Big game. We'll look at different aspects of that tomorrow. We'll do our midweek rundown with different breakdowns on Wednesday. Of course, Buy So Hold. Thursday, we'll do our prediction show with Keys to Victory. Had some fun doing the Upon Further Review last night, Trevor, because they pretty much nailed the keys down pretty good in that win. So Tyler said, you got me. I was typing and watching Mean Girls at the same time. That's awesome, Tyler. That's great, man. Detroit Hunter said the Notebook is good, but A Walk to Remember is way better. I think the Notebook was better, but Walk to Remember was also a very good movie. So I got no problem admitting that, but I have not seen Mean Girls. And if I had, I would have said I've seen Mean Girls. So anyway, but so we got a busy week. And then, of course, Trevor, Friday will end things with the mailbag. I will be flying out on Friday as well. And then, of course, Trevor and Sean, Ryan, and Vince and the guys will do the post-game show on Saturday. So it's going to be a lot of fun. The Upon Further Review will probably get moved to Monday because Sunday's a travel day for me. I'll let you guys know if that changes, but just to keep that in mind, that's probably what we're going to do next week as well. So anyway, for Trevor Trowbridge, I'm Brian Driscoll. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.